I'm going to talk to you all as equals, because I'm looking at a room of micro-biochemical biofuel producers with multiple years of experience. So I don't need to explain any more from that. I'm sure you all know what I mean. But so you're all experts in biochemical biofuel production, so I don't need to do any of that. And I'm English. We started from. Don't start me, sir. Definitions are useful, and I think I put them up for biofuels mainly because I always like to start from a point of knowledge. I'm not going to dwell on this one particularly, but to understand what we are, I had to go and find a definition of biofuels and then see where we played. But if I was to come back, and a particular issue I have at the moment with government is we don't have a policy. And I challenge you all to go home and Google, or Bing, or whoever you want to use, policy, a definition for policy. I came up with a definition from policy which wasn't mine, which said a series of actions and intentions for the long-term community benefit. And then I Googled long-term, and long-term is multi-generational. So, okay, a policy is a series of actions and intentions that are multi-generational for the benefit of the wider community. Take that definition and go back into UK energy policy, and you try and find the last policy that did that. I did, for my sins. On a wet and windy Sunday afternoon, I ran through Hansard. 1977 was the last time this country had a policy that met that definition. And that policy said we're based on coal, we're going to use gas and oil as our transition fuels, and within 30 years, or multi-generational, we're going to have 200 nuclear power plants. And of those you can count, 30 years from 1977 is 2007. And the reason that they chose 2007 because they said we reckon that the North Sea will have started its decline curve by that point. And I say well done to whoever did that policy in 1977 because that was very good. And since then we've not had a policy. And there is one of our problems as an industrialiser. So what is Sita? We are a fuel producer, a fuel collector, a fuel user, a product user, a product seller. We do all of it. We're also part of GDF, and GDF run nuclear power plants, and they run coal power plants, and various other things. They're one of the largest LNG shippers in the world, one of the biggest sufferers from the shale gas boom in America. The thing I put up there, future, from now onwards. So tomorrow is our future. I've got 2 kids. And although I work for a living, I also have a little bit of interest that they have something to grow up to in life. So I do have an interest in making sure their future is the best I can make. And that's not just words, that's a true thing. And just a reference that not all waste is 100% renewable for any of those who think that it is. In waste is plastics and things like that, so it's not all 100% renewable. What's our general experience? Well, we produce just under 3% of all the green energy in the country, most of that from landfill gas. That's in decline because we've stopped putting biodegradable food into landfill. We're the largest shipper of fuels into Europe by wood and by waste, or waste fuels that is, by bale or container. We have our own energy from waste plants, and we've currently got permission for 2.5 million tonnes worth of new facilities, of which about 500,000 tonnes is in build, across a range of technologies from traditional moving grate through to gasification, pyrolysis and anaerobic digestion. So if you get scars from doing one thing, just take away from today that I have lots of scars. And why do I feel qualified today? Well, actually, we started making biofuels in the true liquid sense of biofuels in 2004-05 with a partner. We took landfill gas that we had and we decided that rather than making electricity, which is a thing we knew and we knew how to do and we knew how to sell and we knew all the risks, we'd stick our toe out and we'd do something completely different, and we'd take that and make it into a liquid biofuel, liquid biomethane. So we suck all the gas off the landfill site, we clean it up, we liquefy it, we get rid of the nitrogen, we get rid of the CO2, leaving us with 98% pure methane. Do you know what? That was the easiest thing that we had on the agenda to do, and it was on our list of things as the hardest thing that we had to do. The technology was the easy thing, because there's lots of really good technical people in this country and around the world that can do stuff like that. The hard thing is, what do you do with it when you've made it? Who do you sell it to? Who buys gas? How many gas fuel stations were there when we started? 15 around the country, and then they went down after that. We were making it for vehicle fuel. Who uses vehicle? How many gas vehicles are in this country? Not many. It took us 4 years to commercialise that product. And in 2 years, since then, we've flipped from a point of oversupply to a point of undersupply. So now we've got too many customers, not enough fuel, which is a nice position to be in, but I wish it wouldn't take 2 years to flip. So lots of hard scars. One of the most green fuels. It's about 72% of the carbon footprint, 72% less carbon footprint than normal liquefied LNG. So really good fuel. Lots of users now, very clean. We're currently building, I have about 4 ships, 1 from Australia, 3 from Ireland at the moment, bringing to Avonmouth our next little experiment, which is to take waste plastics, pots, trays, films and things like that, and crack it back to diesel and kerosene. Building's up, kit's on the move. We'll commission that in March. Is that a biofuel? No, it's not. It's all fossil, but it's a good example of the process. We've had to industrialise that. We've had to go and find the technology that worked, a market segment. We've then had to industrialise the process, which is to take something that works and then make it work well, because we're here to make money, not to experiment. So we've had to change the back. We've had to go into markets we don't know. We've had to employ people like Foster Wheeler to do the back end, because we have to distill it and fraction it and do little refinery stuff. And the feedstock. So as of March, that should be hopefully commissioning, and then we'll have a year's worth of optimisation on that as we learn how to use it. So you come back to I'm going to spend waste, because waste is our field, and also waste is one of the big target markets, as you saw from Grant's slide, for us to look at. So what do we do with it? Well, some of the material we still put to landfill. That's because we haven't got enough facilities in this country. Some of it we make RDF and SRF. Don't worry about that, as we just condition it into a product that a customer wants. We supply that to the UK, but most of it goes overseas. So we send that to Latvia, to Sweden, to the Netherlands, to Le Havre in the near future. Our friends in Australia send theirs to Malaysia and other places. Why do we send it abroad, not using it in this country? Well, one is it's really hard to get stuff developed in this country for lots of reasons that we'll go into. And the second is overseas regard this as a commodity, and over here we regard it as a waste. And that mental jump between the two means that over here it's really hard to get stuff done, and over abroad it's quite easy to do that. A little tale of adventure. 2007, one of my first things in innovation that I did was I started to make wood fuel as a product. And I went to all the UK users of wood fuel and said, would you like to buy my fuel? And they said, no. Would you like to pay me to take it? I said, that's illogical, Captain. I won't do that. So I went abroad and said to anyone abroad, I said, will you buy this fuel from me? And the Swedes said, yes, not only will we buy it from you, but we'll send a boat and we'll pick it up at a port of your choosing in this country. So I went back to the UK users and said, thanks guys, but I don't need you, because these guys are going to buy it from me. And they said, no, we're not going to buy it from you. That's not the market. I said, no, that's the market. That's the international market. And since then, we've gone from doing one load, which was 3,000 tonnes, to about 200,000 tonnes this year that we send away. We've also just won a contract to supply one of the new biomass plants up in Scotland on a very innovative way. And I'll come back to that in terms of contracting things, because I think in many ways part of the problem is not planning, which you traditionally go to. Part of the process is the thinking. We have a very linear and very rigid structure of thinking in this country, which is our problem. We make crude energy, direct electricity or direct conversion. We take clean organics or soil separated materials into AED. We don't do fermentation yet, but that's something we're looking at and would have talked about. But, and I'm sorry for this, doing before your lunch, one problem with waste is it's not a single source product. It's not like buying wood from trees. So what you've got here, that is our customer's view of soil separated food waste. Yeah. So that bag and that lump of metal and that lump of wood is not exactly soil separated. So we have lots of customers who are contamination inconsistent, shall we call it. Wood, green waste, biomass. But we call them all by different names. So some people that's compost, to other people it's biomass prior to drying. And sometimes we mix and match our definitions in that process. smelt to high heaven, that stuff when we tipped it out. But the only way we can prove to the customer that their material wasn't source separated was tip it on the floor and get them to point out how the plastic bag got in there. A little towel. We have a plant that recycles road sweepings and gets the materials out of that. And with the big vacuum cleaners that drive along the road, and up in Birmingham, and one truck arrived with a bike frame in it. So we then asked for a full definition specification for his Hoover, because that's a really powerful Hoover. And he couldn't explain how that bike frame got in there. Then you look at waste as a product, and we've been very successful in moving waste away from landfill. 20 million tonnes in 4 years and 30 million tonnes in 10 years. That's a lot of material we've moved out of landfill. So this is not a commodity that's going to go on forever, and it's something that people are chasing a lot. And one thing that we're pointing out to DEC, which they haven't quite realised, is the most successful base load green energy supply in this country for electricity is landfill gas. No one ever talks about it because it's not sexy, it's not a wind turbine, but it is, but it's going to die away. And you can see the bottom curve there, the little green curve, that's the start of the decline curve of landfill gas. So actually the renewable target we have today is based on a technology and a fuel stock that is going to decline over the next few years. And in 20 years it will be a fraction of what it is today. So not only have they got to build new capacity, they've got to replace the lost capacity in the process. And I don't think DEC have quite got it in their heads in terms of targets. Fuel exports. This is not small-scale stuff. We have our own boat. We have our own thousands of containers that we stick on this thing. And we're shipping it. And a lot of concern at the moment in developers, which we get as a feedstock supplier and a feedstock off-taker, is, well, we're giving our feedstock to other people. And we point out that actually, if we continue to be poor in development in this country, then yes, the right thing to do with this feedstock is to give it to someone who will make better use of it. And if it's not us, more fool us. If we get good conditions, we'll use it in this country. If I flick back to that curve, the orange part of that curve is the potential contribution from residual waste into energy. Now that's expressed in electrical energy, but that could be any sort of energy, biofuel energy. And then the top green curve is our prediction of what AD could do in terms of biomethane and others. So this is not a feedstock that is ours to play with. It's a feedstock that's an international commodity. RDF and SRF are now tracking brown coal South African price. Not the same price, but they're tracking it. So it's a commodity in everybody's mind, bar UK government. However, it's still quite nascent and small. There's about 2.5 million tonnes of approvals to ship material, but only about 400,000 or 500,000 tonnes actually moved. And I had to put an MP that I met earlier in the week who was thinking that we were moving 2.5 million tonnes. We're not. We're moving a few 100,000 tonnes at the moment. So we have the opportunity to make use of it in this country if we're quick, slick and clever, or to supply it to other people if we're not. So as a developer, what are the things? Well, my biggest thing is lack of understanding. Lack of understanding at government level of the opportunity, a complete lack of understanding of risk and of the choices. The right thing to do with waste is not to make electricity, but the majority of permissions that are currently being built out are to make electricity, because the incentives and government policy drives us down a route. Is that the right thing to do with that fuel? Well, actually, there's other ways of making electricity, nuclear, wind, and other things that can do that job nearly as well or better, in which case, shouldn't we just take our mix of fuel sources and decide what the best thing to do with it is? In terms of risk, we have a polarised risk structure mentality in this country that says, I want to offset all my feedstock risk on you, Mr. Supplier, and we get that. So I want a 15-year guaranteed supply RPI'd with a put and pay that accounts not only for you lack of supply, but also adds up all of the costs of non-supply and the energy supply and everything else. And therefore, your put payment, should you fail to supply, is about 5 times the gate fee. And as a company, I look at that and say, well, where's the interest for me to do that? How can I predict what's going to happen in 5 or 10 years' time? I can't. So that polarises me. So then you have a nice polarised discussion between the two. When actually what you really want to do is make sure the plant's always full. If the plant's full and working at its most efficiency, it's going to be the most economic position. So you incentivise me as the feedstock supplier, you incentivise me or somebody else as the off-taker to get the best price. And actually that balancing of risks, the really guarantee you only want is to make sure the facility is full. That doesn't happen, although we have one contract now, quite a large supply contract, where that is the case. Our only obligation is to fill the plant. And we have freedom on the gate fee. And we're bonused on getting the best gate fee. And they share some of the upside, and they share some of the downside. So there are people there that's getting that in their head, that actually the main important thing is that the plant's full. Lack of clear policy. Oh, please. What is the policy? Well, there isn't. I've done that before. There is no policy in this country. It's very unclear what we want to do, what we favour. 2 years ago, government was telling me that self-sufficiency was important, and now look at what we're going to do. We're going to import lots of wood from overseas. So I'm not sure how that's consistent on a policy basis. So it's quite hard for me as an industrial player to invest multiples of billions of pounds in the UK, which we want to do, and we are, when I can't see beyond 2 years. And RTFO, poor old Department of Transport, got a programme to find the next target for 2020, which hopefully they'll have in place by 2014, on a plant that will take 3 or 4 years to develop. So that gives me, the developer, if I'm lucky, maybe 2 years of certainty of credits before I run out of credit zone. How does that work? Well, it means that I'm quite nervous of developing. We do need an energy policy that's long-term, 20 to 30 years. People say that's impossible. It's not. We have one. We have an energy policy enshrined in the carbon law, which is 40 years, goes to 2050. It has carbon budgets at certain periods of time. It sets out clearly what the government strategy is, and it's enshrined in law. And as a country, we're not very good at changing law, so I quite like that. We have the banding review, which has been feeding information into the EMR, which is coming. The RHI, the FIT, the RTFO have spent the last 2 months doing nothing but consult on government consultations. It's my Christmas present, I think, to have as many as possible. We've got one tomorrow. We had one last week. There is no policy, and that's difficult to develop projects with no policy. Disjointed integration. You have people sitting at one end of the table who want one thing and who disregard everything that the people at the other end of the table want. And until we actually get producer, distributor, user, developer and infrastructure together and say, actually, what's the main reason we're here for? We're here to develop a project to make as much money between ourselves as possible, and hopefully in there some things about doing the right thing as well. That makes us all feel good, but at the moment you've got very polarised positions. So we have to be a bit more clever and a bit more integrated in the way we work. Planning. I talk a lot at conferences, and I've started to decline conferences that have a large section about planning. It's a complete red herring. It's not the issue we think. Yes, it could be more predictable. Yes, it could be less costly. Yes, it would be nice to be a bit quicker. But in our industry, we've got 32.5 million tonnes of projects. We only have 26 million tonnes of feedstock left. So planning is not the issue. We've got more than enough. So the question is, why aren't we building out all those permissions? Nothing to do with planning. The majority of them have got planning. So planning is difficult, but also planning has a social context. If I want to build something that's big, industrial-looking, heavy plant, if I put it in an area that's comfortable with big, heavy-looking plants like Teesside or Avonmouth, Southampton, places like that, do you know what? That society says, oh, we're used to that. That's what we normally have. Great, come on. And most of the letters we get in are saying, when can I apply for a job? If I apply to try and put something industrial in Surrey or industrial in Warwickshire, who are rural, whose view of industry is some light industrial sheds around the corner where they take their car to service, no wonder you get a bad reaction, because a lot of people in this country are very unused to heavy industry, and we're asking them to accept heavy industry activities. So there's an education process there. There's a better integration. There's a lot more work we need to do with society to make it more predictable for them. So what you see now is a concentration of new permissions and new capacity for waste in heavy industrial areas. And what we're then doing is using the rail network and ships to move the waste to the point where we can get permission. Not necessarily the right thing to do, but it's the easiest way to get permission because you're working with society that's comfortable with that. Market knowledge. Quality of feedstock. Many years, people in the EU worked on the SEN standards for RDF. They said, okay, we're going to make a set of standards that will help commoditise this feedstock. We'll come up with a whole pile of very technical feedstock supply constraints, and then you can supplier can come out and say, I want SEN standard 3 for a feedstock, say, and we know what that means, and we'll make it to that quality. We've been doing RDF for 3 years. Not a single one of our supplies is based on a SEN standard. It's based on a user standard. It says, my plant, I want this. So completely pointless doing a standard that has no relevance to the system. Volume of available feedstock over time. How much feedstock will you get and where you go? Northern Europe in over capacity at the moment, so they're sourcing material elsewhere. If we bought everything that's got permission in this country, then we'll be in over capacity as well. So it's about balancing that feedstock and doing the right thing. And I put at the bottom just an extract from the RAP gate fee report for energy from waste plants. And you just look at the range of numbers you've got there over time, 2009, 10, 11. What you generally see is a drop in price over time. That's true. Waste delinked from landfill prices about 2 years ago. And the price has dropped since then as landfill's gone up. We still get people come along and say, will you do a feedstock contract banked on landfill price minus £2 or something like that? And we say no, because actually it's minus at quite a lot less than that. You have long-term contracts for use of energy now that are in the £60 a tonne range, while landfill's in the £80 a tonne range. So there's quite a difference in the two. So a lot of developers, a lot of people don't understand the feedstock market. But feedstock will change. You look at food. In this country, if I want to place food waste into an AD plant, generally I'll pay for that today. In Belgium, they'll pay me. That market's moved from a point where you pay to get rid of it to a point of where people buy it from you. And all you'll have in this country is, over the next 10 years, we'll go to that position. I'm a director of ABDA. I had a very interesting discussion with regard to the gas report. We had a long debate about feedstock contracts and bankability. If you take that model and say within the next 10 years we'll go from a position where people pay to get rid of it to where people buy it in that process, the question being is, what covenant do I bring to that contract? Because actually in the first 5 years, yes, I'm a revenue source. And then after that, in that model, I'm looking at the developer's covenant and saying, well, can you afford to buy it from me? And everyone agreed, but hadn't quite got in their head that change meant that actually the whole issue of covenant and supply and gate fee and trying to get a funder to get a 10 or 15 year bankable feedstock contract didn't work, because everyone agreed with that in a model. Disagreement about when, but everyone agreed that eventually they'll be buying it from us. And therefore the whole covenant issue and bankability on the feedstock supply was an irrelevance, because ultimately you reverse that. And again, it comes to that maturity and knowledge in the market. Real blocker at the moment, funding. That's just because there's not enough maturity in the marketplace to understand what the common and key drivers are. On a gasification project making electricity, gate fees about 30% of the revenue today, and energy prices are the remainder. So which part of that project is going to make that project fly? The gate fee or the energy? It's going to be the energy. In which case, making sure your plant's full with the ideal food stock is more important than the actual price you pay for it. Opportunity, millions of tonnes of feedstock, but we do need to be quick. There's lots of people after it in this country and abroad. There's currently a delegation from a Far East country sourcing feedstock in this country for shipping around to Asia. So this is not our own feedstock that we can keep, it's a commodity that we have to fight for. But we should, I think, in that process, choose the right thing. There's quite a lot of studies that says biofuels are the right thing to make with waste. Waste is a really good source of making biofuels, and it's a homegrown material and it's distributed. It would be nice if government had the same commonality of its thinking. And in conclusion, it's already a significant source of green energy. It's going to die away in a bit with landfill gas, so we have to replace that, or we have to find some other technology to do it. It does have a significant role to play in biofuel development. We make ethanol with a partner in Finland. We don't make ethanol in this country, not for any technical reasons or feedstock reasons, but purely because we, as a company, fail to understand how we can commercialise ethanol at the scale that we can produce it. My biomethane argument expanded. And its composition, use, legislative, incentive environments are complex. You have to be quite clever. And as my boss continually tells me, I have to be persistent and resilient. Thank you.